Hey guys, so the point of this video today is pretty much just to show that mouse acceleration is just better than regular keyboard and mouse one sensitivity 1-to-1. Now, I do need to explain because depending on the way you use mouse accel, it can be shit and just completely throw your game, throw your aim. And the quote, 99% of players stop right before they reach their curve is correct, because I was in that same boat. Trying out different curves like natural and linear and I forget what the curves are called, classic, whatever it is. They're just trash. It's just the best way to sum it up. They're just trash. The problem with it, and this is also something Viscose alluded to in her video, top tier aimer woman. One thing she alluded to in her video is just that it makes your dynamic static clicking and also your tracking, it just makes it very inconsistent and hard to be as precise as you would need to be to have top tier aim. You could definitely kind of circumvent it or kind of mitigate it to a degree, but it's just not something that I would want to play on. Then it would be better just to stick to 1 sense. But if you are able to do your settings the way that I'm going to show you today, it's the best thing. And I'll break it down like this. Now, as far as my credentials, I'll show my stats here. The main game I play is Fortnite. I'll show my stats here. Definitely, there may be people better, but definitely not the worst. So, pretty good at the game, pretty good aim. When it comes to voltaic, pretty much a master. When it comes to dynamic clicking, and my reactive tracking, everything else is like diamond or jade. So, take that as what it is, but, definitely not shit. But the fact of where my level of skill is means that this shit will work for anyone. And then the better of aimer you are, the more you'll be able to get out of it. But the purpose of it is you have 2 senses, not 1. And then unlike other Excel curves or, I'm using dynamic sensitivity curves where you have a million different senses because it's constantly changing throughout the sense. You have 2 senses with this. And I've played on different curves before, and the consistency with my flicks didn't feel there. Like I didn't feel confident going for flicks because I didn't know where the mouse was going to stop at. And then it's also affecting me when I was playing like aim lab or aim training type routines. When it came to just making quick readjustments, like if I'm tracking something or if I am going for flicks, it was hard to be as consistent. Whereas on a regular keyboard and mouse sense, it was, with no Excel curve, it's easier to just be consistent with where your mouse is going to be at. And so these trash curves, I tried them for like 10 minutes and was like, nope. Jump was the only one that had potential. And I tried it for a few weeks, but I couldn't get over the consistency with the flicks. But in the back of my mind, I always had the thought of, well, maybe if I could customize it in a way to still have my flick consistency, but still get that boost in speed, it would be good. But I just didn't feel like doing it. Went back to regular keyboard and mouse. But the problem when it comes to regular keyboard and mouse is just that it's not really a problem, but, as things progress, what you're progressing from is going to be worse than what you're progressing to. You only have 1 sense. So if you're playing a game like COD, your sense is going to need to be high enough to where you can track people in close range scenarios, slide canceling around you, right? Whereas if you're playing something like CSGO, you could play on a much slower sense to get maximized precision because you're not going to really need to be doing crazy fast turns to be able to keep up with someone in a game like Apex or Fortnite or COD, or those more fast-paced games. You're going to need a higher sense, but obviously higher sensitivity, usually less accurate. So Now you're going to have to learn to be accurate on that higher sense. And even if you can, I've played on, my range is 6 centimeters all the way up to, I've played on 20, but I would say my range is about 6 centimeters per 360 to about 25. That's pretty much what I can do very good on. 10 or 20 centimeters, I can do good, but I wouldn't say to the point where I've mastered it. I can play on those higher senses, but it's not the same degree of consistency as if I'm playing on a super low sense. It's just not. So when you're playing on those senses, if you play super low, which I've done, you're going to be good if someone's in front of you. But if they ever get in an awkward angle behind you, you're cooked. You're going to be constantly mouse resetting, and it's just hard with how fast paced things are to be able to do all of that. And it's still, it's just going to be an awkward fight the whole time. And for COD, it might be unplayable. So you'd have to play on something higher. But again, it's just a different amount of precision you can have and consistency you can have when you're playing on something lower. And so that's where this jump comes in at. I went back in, was able to get it customized. And the main point is that you have to keep your base sense long enough to do everything you need to do aiming. So your smooth tracking, your micro adjustments, your micro flicks, your regular flicks, your quick readjustments, like if you're tracking something strafing, and only get that speed kick in when you're trying to do a 180 or you're trying to do a 270 degree turn. Like when you're trying to turn to readjust where you're looking at, or trying to track something that just went behind you. But then once that's done, you go back to your regular sense. And so playing around with it on this dynamic curve, I can see, and you could also do this in raw Excel, I can see how much the mouse is moving and where it is. Setting that at 30 ms, whatever it is, 30, that allows me to do everything I need to do aiming. And the only time the jump speed boost will kick in is when I need it, which if I completely flick my wrist, it'll do a 180. But if I'm doing just flicks, if I'm doing tracking, if I'm doing anything else, it's going to stay on that standard sense. So that right there fixes all the problems that Visco's spoke about in her video, because your senses are going to be constantly changing versus having multiple senses. You have two senses. One for all aiming, one for like doing 180 turns or quick turns to keep up with someone. That's pretty much what it is. And so with this, what I recommend and what I've done, go as low as possible on that first sense. I'm at 60 centimeters. You could even go lower than that. 60 centimeters per 360. But then whenever I flick that wrist for the speed up, I have it jump in right away. I don't have it gradually. This software, it only limits it. That's about as close as I can get it to just completely going from one thing to the next. But go there, and as soon as I need that speed, it jumps to it. And it jumps to around, 25 centimeters per 360. And so now it's perfect. I literally get TAC FPS type precision in any game I play, COD, Fortnite, obviously TAC FPS. But I don't get screwed by that slow of a sense, because when I need the speed, I just flick the wrist and it snaps and do 180. And if you're looking at the gameplay, there's been some situations where, I was able to snap, and it almost looks robotic. It almost looks aimbotish. Just like it all looks unreal, looks I'm cheating. And in a sense, it is cheating compared to regular keyboard and mouse, because if you pick the lower sense, you wouldn't have those speedy turns, right? You would have to reset your mouse and just a whole lot. Whereas me, I don't run out of mouse pad space. I can just flick my wrist, I'm 180, and then I'm back to tracking you. If you pick a higher sense, right, okay, yeah, you'll be able to turn and keep up, but it's not going to be the same degree of difficulty for you to hit a shot as it is me on a low sense. And if you pick a mid sense, then you're kind of losing out on both ends, turning and precision. And so with this, versus having to play different games, change your sense, unless you're playing similar type of games like COD, Apex. But if you play a variety of games, you could just do one sense, because you have the maximum precision on that low sense for your tracking, for your flicking, for your micro adjustments. But then you have a turning sense when you need to turn around quick. And like I said, I can do hard flicks. I can do everything, and that sense stays on 60 centimeters per 360. But when I flick my wrist, if I flick my wrist at my whatever speed it is that I flick my wrist, I'm not really sure how to describe it, but the muscle memory of me flicking that wrist, it snaps and does 180. Or I could go all the way across my pad and do a full 360. And I'm getting two senses in one, and that's going to be just one standard keyboard mouse sense. It's also going to be the constantly changing sense where you can't really build up any sort of rhythm or really consistency with it because it's constantly changing like a controller. So I think this is the wave. I think if you do this, if you play game trainers, all your scores are going to go up. If you play, games, you're going to see massive improvements because just aiming on a lower sense is just so much easier compared to a higher sense. It's almost like you have to try to miss. And then, like I said, the only drawback is playing on something that low, which I have played on 60 minutes with 360 and COD and in Fortnite with no mouse acceleration. And you will get in spots where someone's just at an awkward angle behind you and you just can't quite get to them because while you're turning, they're walking around you, and then you have to keep turning and maybe you get them, but it's barely, or you just end up dying. Whereas with this jump method, you get there immediately. Get there immediately. So, I've showed a few things in here, showing aim labs, showing, just in-game scenarios where, I'll even put a clip in where I'm, just doing like a little practice bot, and you could see it with the dynamic sense on, how I can just snap in any scenario and then be accurate with them. And then you see with it off how that is. So you guys continue to take a look. Tell me what you think. I think this is the way going forward when it comes to aiming. But try it out. Let me know what you think in the comments. Hey, I'm going to be using it. So if you're going against me, it is what it is. So hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good day.